I am very involved in the queer women's community in Western Massachusetts, and people come right out and say to me how yoga is not queer friendly, and so I'm going to talk about in the workshop about the origins of the language masculine and feminine. And, coming from a sacred sexuality training background, I very quickly needed to get on my game because I offered my programs to everybody. And I would say, LGBTQIA plus welcome, and it would come. And I quickly needed to learn how to teach this.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. We're so glad that you're joining us for part 2 of our special live series featuring some incredible presenters from SYTAR 2025, IAYT's annual symposium on yoga therapy and research. I'm Kelly Freeman, part of the team here at IAYT, and I'm thrilled to be live with you today alongside my colleague, Marita Greenidge. As we count down to SYTAR this June in Atlanta, we're going to be giving you another behind-the-scenes look at what's in store. And today you're going to meet a few more of this year's presenters, hear about their sessions, and get a sense of the insightful and inspiring conversations that make SYTAR such a meaningful gathering for the yoga therapy community. We'll also be answering your questions live, so you can drop them in the chat anytime. And to help us settle in before we begin, I'm going to start by offering a short centering, just a moment to arrive, breathe, and prepare for today's conversation. We're streaming on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, so whether you're here with us live or catching the replay, welcome. And we're so glad that you are part of this ongoing conversation. So let's take a moment to arrive. Find a comfortable seat, either upright or resting back. And you can let your hands rest gently on your lap or wherever they feel comfortable. If you'd like to, you can softly close your eyes or lower your gaze to a spot in front of you. And begin by simply noticing that you're here and that you're in company. Let go of whatever came before this moment and whatever may come after. Allow yourself to be right here, right now. Bring your attention to your breath. No need to change it, just notice. Feel the inhale move in through your nose. And feel the exhale gently leave the body. And take a few more breaths just like this, slow, steady, and natural. Now gently draw your awareness to your body, noticing the areas where your body makes contact with the chair if you're seated, or the floor if you happen to be standing up. Notice any areas of tension you may be holding in your body. Without trying to fix anything or change anything, simply observe. If you notice any tension in your jaw, your shoulders, or your belly, invite softness into those areas. Let yourself become a bit more settled than you were moments ago. Following your breath, allow your next inhale to deepen, drawing in through the nose. And open your mouth and exhale. Maybe sighing your breath out, letting go of whatever you don't need right in this moment. You can take another deep breath in through the nose and sigh it out in an open-mouthed exhale. And as we begin this session together, may we do so with presence and curiosity for ourselves and for one another. When you're ready, you can slowly bring some movement back to your body and gently open your eyes. And welcome. Thank you so much for taking that moment to pause and ground with us. It's always powerful to begin from a place of presence, especially when we're about to dive into something as rich and inspiring as our conversation with this group of SYTAR presenters. So that said, let's jump in and meet them. And of course, as I mentioned, we'll leave some space for your questions. So feel free to drop those into the comments at any time. I'd like to get started with some introductions, and I'd love for each of you to go around and briefly share who you are, where you're joining us from, and maybe a little bit about what led you to the path of yoga or yoga therapy. And I know that Cheryl has to leave us a little bit before everyone else. So I'm going to start with you, Cheryl. You want to tell us a bit about yourself? Oh, I think you are muted.
Yeah, I can actually stay, but I'm happy to go now as well. Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl Fenner Brown, and I live in a little town above Durham, North Carolina called Bahama. Often people call it Bahama, but it's pronounced Bahama. And it's very much in the woods where I live. It's a very country living, but close to the city. And I started with yoga therapy, I guess it was right after I finished my yoga teacher training program. I actually studied with the teachers at Piedmont Yoga Studio in Oakland, California back in 2004. And it was a fabulous long program. And the one question that I still had on my mind at the end of that was why? Why do the poses make us feel the way that they do? You know, why do we feel calm after doing a forward fold? Why do we feel a little bit more energized after we do pranayama or do a back bend? And that why led me to study with the Integrative Yoga Therapy School at Kripalu over the next about 10 years. And I, besides being a yoga therapist, I have been a Reiki master for even longer than I've been a yoga practitioner. And before I even started doing any yoga, I remember being, I was a software trainer. So I had experience training adults. And I went to a yoga class and the teacher said, okay, stand in mountain and feel your feet. And I thought, okay. And, back then when we had resumes, the resumes that you would, put the bullet points on, one of the bullet points was, can multitask. Well, this was a teacher that was asking me to single task. And I don't think I had ever done that before. And that one moment of just being asked to focus on something about my body was like, that's where the heavens opened up. It was like, wow, that is groundbreaking. It was groundbreaking for me anyway. And that excitement I still have that. I mean, I get chills even thinking about that moment. I still have that amount of excitement when I'm teaching and also when I find something new in my own body. So throughout the time of my training, I started specializing in cancer. And that's kind of my primary focus. Well, there's two, cancer and elder adults. So right now I actually teach for a CCRC, a residential care facility. I'm their yoga therapist. And I teach classes in asana, and I try to incorporate all of the different practices of yoga, not just asana. So, mudra and yoga nidra and chanting and just everything that I can pull into it to bring our whole selves into that healing journey. And I teach a training. I do a cancer training in the fall. I do yoga nidra trainings. I have an app that I developed, a yoga encyclopedia app. And I'm just really excited to be able to share my passion for this practice that really has taught me how to be compassionate to myself. That's the biggest gift, I think, of yoga, being a yoga practitioner for 20 years now, that I feel like I am so much more kind to myself in my mind. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I think I was muted. I just said thank you. Thank you for sharing about yourself, and nice to meet you. I'm going to go around and let's hear from Natalie. You want to introduce yourself?
I would love to. So I'm so excited to be on the same call as my mentor, Cheryl Fenner Brown. She really helped me get started on the yoga therapy path. She and other wonderful teachers and mentors that I've had along the way, such as Genevieve Yellen, Michelle Lawrence, Molly Lannon Kenny, and of course, Cheryl Fenner Brown. I began my career as a performer, a Broadway performer, and I found yoga as a really wonderful antidote to the stressful career of being a full-time musical theater performer. Fast forward 15 years, and I now am the resident yoga therapist at an end-of-life care home in San Antonio, Texas. And never in a million years would I have thought that I would be serving this population, but it is such an important population to serve. And I really want to give a shout out to Cheryl and Molly for helping me find this path. I was lucky enough to do Cheryl's cancer training. She was my mentor. I met her at the cancer support community in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she introduced me to the amazing population of people who are undergoing cancer and have been touched by cancer, the caregivers that support them, the people who work in this field, as well as an older population. And I really found a kinship and a real calling to serve people in these populations. A lot of times this is a notoriously underserved population. And what we see at the end-of-life care home, where I am the yoga therapist, is that a lot of these people don't have much. They don't have a lot of people with them. They don't have a lot of resources. And so what really got me curious was being able to provide yoga therapy tools to people at the end of life. And there's been a lot of education around that too, because, you bring to the layperson, hey, we're going to do yoga. And they're like, what are you talking about? So a lot of education that yoga is much more than just physical postures. And so we partner a lot with the death doula movement, and we incorporate a lot of the subtle practices into our bedside approach. And so things like Cheryl mentioned, mudra, mantra, pranayama techniques, deep listening, doing a lot of self-study, both for myself and the other people that I train to work with this population so that we can be fully present for those that we serve. So I'm really excited to talk a lot about the program. We have a training program as well for people who want to serve those at the end of life. I have a podcast called Before You Go, where we talk a lot about death and dying and kind of dispel some of the myths around hospice and we talk a lot about the fears of mortality and the unconscious bias that sometimes comes up when serving this population. So I'm excited to meet you all at SYTAR, and I can't wait to learn from the rest of my colleagues and peers. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. We're excited to meet you and see you in person at SYTAR. And it's really neat that you and Cheryl will be teaching at the same event and get to see each other and spend some time together, hopefully.
It's full circle. It's super cool.
Yeah, very cool. Let's go to Gina. You want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. My name's Gina M. Barrett, and I'm the founder of Casa de Paz SLV, as well as I have a private practice called Eastern and Somatic Therapies. And I'm based in Crestone, Colorado, as well as Conway, Massachusetts, which is in Western Massachusetts. That's where I spend the summers. And to answer your question, it was kind of cool. I grew up just outside of Boston and in the 70s, and we had yoga in gym class. And I was also really into gymnastics, but my body type was too big, and I got cut from gymnastics in like 6th grade. So I think I just, took to yoga. I did it like several times a week, but I have a lot of energy. I've always had a lot of like spiritual energy. So I couldn't really handle the breathing part of yoga at that age. And when I was in my early 30s, I bought my first home, and it had a leak in the chimney, and my bedroom was upstairs. So the chimney went like up. So I had a carbon monoxide exposure for about a year. And I was, talking to my doctor about it, and she was a good, like, holistic style doctor, but first place she sent me was guess where? Because of my symptoms, because I would get sick on the weekends when I was home. She sent me to a therapist. And I knew it wasn't, I think she thought I had anxiety or something. And I knew it wasn't. So I went to a retreat center in Puerto Rico. This was like back in the 90s. Like, retreat centers were just like it was run by therapists out of New York City. And they knew, like, let's set up this retreat center. Our clients need it. And it was like this one-on-one experience where they were very present with their language the whole time, and yoga every day. And at one point, I was going to all the classes because it felt so good. At one point, the teacher was like, you don't need to do it every day. Like, she wasn't wanting to teach me every single day or something, but I was so into it. And after that, I just like started studying. And interestingly enough, I was interested in, I was looking online where I should study, and I got attracted to Phoenix Rising yoga therapy because of the mental health aspect. Don't ask me why at that age I was like interested in that, but I was. So I became a yoga therapist before I got certified to teach. And so that's a little story about how I got into it. And, I just started my own private practice. Primarily, I got also drawn down the path of sacred sexuality. So I used for all those years since like the early 2000s, clients came to me who were needing that kind of support, often because of sexual assault trauma and just, sexual concerns. So I really blended Phoenix Rising yoga therapy into that work for many years, and I still do that work now. I'm doing it more, I call it connection post-pandemic groups, because we're all looking for connection right now. So that's my private practice, and that's based on my book, Connection Post-Pandemic. It's the second edition of Lighter Living Tantra, this is the first edition. The second edition is an ebook. And we're organizing a trip to the border. It's going to happen in like a week and a half. And we do holistic trauma support. But because I got the SEVA award in 2022, and because yoga is just, it was pretty cool to see like hundreds of people in a refugee camp, in like 2020 doing yoga. So we kind of became known for that more than anything else. And the people who are going down there to serve are yoga and trauma-informed yoga instructors. So that's what I'm up to these days. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. And it's interesting that your teacher back in the day said you don't need to do it every day. But as I'm sure all of us know, once you're hooked, you want to do it every day and you notice the benefits and you live it every day. It's not something that goes away once you have the yoga bug. How about Sandi? Do you want to tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for welcoming me into this space. And hello to everyone out there who's watching or just catching up. Yes, so I'm Sandi Tindal, and I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas metroplex area. It's a big hub here. We've got a lot of city, but then the further out you go and to the periphery, it gets, a nice country feel. And so I'm kind of right on the edges there between the city and the country feel. And what I do as a yoga therapist, I specialize. So my specific area of, I feel like it's sort of expertise maybe at this point. It's been a decade's worth of this work, but I'm specializing in the adaptation of yoga practice to the aquatic environment. And going this route has allowed me to help people who live with very challenging conditions, ongoing conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, you name it, like these very challenging chronic ongoing conditions. Sometimes people show up and they're dealing with some musculoskeletal issue that just never quite got resolved through a surgical procedure or through PT. And they're just searching. They're trying to, think outside the box and see what else they could do that can empower them, right? So they're looking for like, what can I do for myself? I feel like I've talked to every sort of person who I think could help me, but I feel like there might be something I can do as an ongoing practice for myself. And so it's been fun for me. I get to work with people in pools, and since 2015, I've been doing this. The past 5 to 6 years, I've been more heavily invested in adapting the tools from the Krishnamacharya Desikachar tradition, so currently known as Vinaya, right? So y'all know the phrase Vinaya, and just we're kind of a fun group. We're just really in love with the breath, and kind of look at our perspective as the breath is like should be brought to front and center stage. That's how I like to think about it. So I've been aquatic therapy and rehab certified for quite some time. And the past couple years, I've actually been a presenter at their international conferences, because there's a lot of, if you will, hungry learners there in that context too. They're really curious about this transformative practice of yoga and how it can be brought to the aquatic environment. So that's what I've been up to. And just a quick little sutrified, if you will, story about how I got into yoga. I actually used to be heavily deep in the world of engineering. I was an electrical engineer and was working for a major defense company in this area. And it was tough. I was being pushed to work 80 hours a week at one point in my career. Looking back and even saying that now, it just doesn't make any sense. How can a human being work 80 hours a week? I don't know. I look back and I don't know, but maybe needless to say, I mean, y'all are I can see on your faces, you're very sympathetic about this. And it's just like, yeah, it wrecked me mentally. And so my first entry to yoga was just like noticing like, what's going on with my breath? Like I would put my hands around my rib cage and I was like, I don't think anything's moving around here. That's not right. Right? Like I had one of these realizations, like, I don't think my breath is really moving, freely and generously within me. So I decided to work hard and, seek out what could help me in that process. And that was the practice of yoga. So thank you so much for listening to my story. And I look forward to sharing a little bit more about my presentation, but I'll go ahead and pass it back to Kelly at this point.
Sandi, how interesting. Yeah, 80 hours a week. That's crazy. And then I feel like your story about, nothing is moving and you're not breathing deeply. And like part of that is letting go of that, grueling work week so you can breathe, so you can come back into your body. And I feel like, all of us, most of us come to yoga from that place of just, realizing that something isn't right and needing change physically, mentally, in our life. And, it's transformative in all areas. So thank you. Nice to meet you.
I was actually going to add after Sandi said that I totally relate. Every time someone mentions something about the corporate space, it always takes me back. And I always reflect on, because I understand that space of the hours. And I look back and I'm like, how were you even doing it? How were you even functioning? Because you don't even realize. It's only like when you stop and you move into a different space and you're like, whoa, that was really, really not healthy. So I always relate to that. So like it's a space I'm very interested in, and reformed corporate warriors. But it was really quite interesting, I would say, listening to all your stories and everything that brought you to the field, because everyone has such a varied mix. Like it's a very eclectic background. It's so interesting. So thank you for that, rich experiences. And what I'd like to do now is turn it to what you will be offering at SYTAR. So what I'm hoping is that you will give us a quick snapshot of your session, what you'll be focusing on, and what folks can expect to learn. We're going to do this round robin style again, but we're not going to start with Cheryl first. So we're going to let someone come to the stage first. And I think I was going to start with Sandi, but you just went there. So we're going to go to someone else. So let's start with Natalie, because, I'm totally fascinated with your microphone. So yeah, let's hear a bit about what you'll be offering at SYTAR.
Yeah, I love this microphone too. It was my my Christmas present to myself this year. So during our time together at SYTAR, I want to invite people to explore their own mortality. In our culture now, it's taboo sometimes to talk openly about death and dying. In fact, we sometimes have to change some of our social media handles and hashtags so that we don't get flagged for review, because it is a little taboo in our culture. So we'll talk about how death and dying has been approached in millennia past. So looking at the sutras, looking at the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and kind of seeing the history of talking about mortality, and then also the fears of death. And then we'll go into understanding the stages of death. And I like to use the Panchamaya Kosha to look at the 5 different stages of dying. As we all know, it doesn't happen linearly in real life, and neither do the koshas, but for our linear minds, it sometimes helps to break it down that way so that we can start to think about and brainstorm together yoga therapy techniques that we can bring to people at the end of life, whether it's bedside or in their own homes or in a hospital or hospice home. And also thinking about how we want to use yoga therapy tools to help with the grieving process. So the anticipatory grief that we see a lot of times at the end of life through the caregivers of the person who's dying, but also the dying person themselves. And then also touching on the people that serve those at the end of life. So hospice workers, hospital workers, funeral directors, death doulas. How can we encourage them to fill their cups so that they can help others? And then finally, we'll talk about sticky situations in working with people at the end of life and taking a deep dive and doing some self-study on our own unconscious bias. So I mentioned before that I work at an end-of-life care home, kind of a hospice home in San Antonio, Texas. And a lot of the people that we serve come from the chronically unhoused community. And so a lot of times we deal with the unconscious bias that either society puts on this population or that we bring into the rooms ourselves, and how we can address that, how we can partner with it, how we can learn from it, and then continue to provide the care and the love and the yoga to these people at the end of life. So it should be a really interesting experience that we'll explore together at SYTAR. It'll be experiential. There'll be time for class discussion and brainstorming, and also identifying some of those sticky situations that we can talk about as a group.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Natalie. It's such a difficult subject to discuss. You know, we're all getting older, and for those of us who still have our parents, you know, I think about that space and how I will manage, you know, when I get there. But it's so interesting to me because there's such an amazing light pouring out of you for someone who is in a space that is considered, I guess, so dreary. So I am really interested in your presentation. I could see that you were in theater because there's a lot of like energy and animation I love it.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I see this as another chance to tell stories, right? And if we practice our deep listening with the people that we serve, we get to tell their stories and share their stories with the world. But first, we have to build that trust. And I think that yoga therapy tools allow us to have that sacred time with them at the end of life.
You're so right. Thank you. Thank you so much. We are going to move over to Cheryl. Tell us a little bit about your presentation.
Thank you. And Natalie, I'm so proud of you. I just can't even. So I can't wait to give you a hug. So 2 years ago, at the last East Coast SYTAR, I did a session that brought together two things that I'm really passionate about. One is working with cancer patients, and the other is equity, diversity and equity. I know that is seeming, some people are trying to make that a bad word these days, but it is definitely not. And what I found in my work with cancer patients is that there's a set of symptoms that a lot of people get that gets mistaken for PTSD, or actually PTSD doesn't get diagnosed in a lot of patients because the symptoms of PTSD are very similar to the symptoms of cancer and cancer treatment. And there's a huge treatment gap between different racial groups. So I presented on that 2 years ago. And between then and now, I have been working with a multicultural team at a Unitarian church that my husband and I belong to. It's called the Eno River. It's a long name. I always have to think. Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And it's primarily our work is in social justice. And I've been presenting with the multicultural team about Racism 101 and Caste 101. And I was brought in to help to give little breaks, little mindfulness breaks in the sessions to help people ground, because we're talking about really heavy and difficult scenarios. And our congregation is about 95% white. And, you know, there's a lot of white fragility that's showing up. There's a lot of implicit bias and people not understanding what microaggressions are. So there are some really quick ways that we can ground ourselves when we're having like an intense conversation. And I was using Mudra, primarily Mudra and breathing. So for this session, that's what I'm going to present about. It's how do you use Mudra for difficult conversations? And the examples that I will be, and it's interesting when I presented, when I sent the application, and this was way before the election cycle ended. So there's a different I think it's even more important now, not only to be able to call out what we're seeing in people, but also call in, especially when you need to call in someone that is a loved one or someone that you think may be open to having a deeper connection. If you see them saying something that's very racist or even a microaggressively racist, it's how do you keep yourself centered and use the tools of yoga therapy to stay calm and then respond rather than react. So that's what I'm going to be presenting about. And I love being able to, just like Natalie said, come show there's pretty much anything that we can face in life, whether it's death and dying to cancer to, racial equity. You can apply yoga therapy to pretty much everything in life. And I think that it creates endless possibilities for us as teachers and as mentors and as practitioners to be able to serve such a broad, you can serve everyone with it. And it's just the most amazing way to allow us to connect to ourselves and to connect to each other.
Thank you for that, Cheryl. As you're speaking, I noted, because we just came from Natalie, and I know you deal with very difficult conversations. And Cheryl, you're doing something. So I think your conversations, the word that comes to mind for me is uncomfortable, because when someone sees something, how do you broach that to help them to understand how you may want to be treated, or you may have seen them treat someone in a particular way, and you would like to help them understand that maybe this might not be the ideal approach? And how do you approach that without creating a situation where people start to get defensive, they don't want to hear, so I think that is very, very important work that you're doing, and we can all learn so much from this. So thank you so much for that. I am going to move to Sandi.
Hello again. I am going to be presenting on blending aquatic therapy with yoga therapy. And we'll take time to spend a special attention on intervention strategies for individuals living with chronic widespread pain. I'm sure you could hear that in my introduction. That's just the work I've been immersed in, pun intended. We will, in this presentation, we'll start with a review, actually. I think it's helpful for us as yoga therapists to really make sure we understand the mechanism of chronic pain, understand the mind's role, the brain's role in the phenomenon of chronic pain. And we're going to briefly look at various models of the pain cycle. When we're clear on this as yoga therapists, these are the kinds of things we can communicate to our client, right? So that they can, if you will, have something, a mirror, so they can start to understand themselves and what's going on in their situation. So we'll look at the various ways that chronic widespread pain manifests in an individual, because it's multifaceted and it's dynamic. And if we can organize that experience, right, of CWP, chronic widespread pain, as yoga therapists, we can be more clear on the value of blending aquatic therapy with yoga therapy. I like to think of the aquatic therapy portion as sort of supercharging your yoga therapy tools. You're going to notice, if you decide to embark on this kind of work, that if you can bring that client into the aquatic environment for even 45 minutes, they're going to experience this tremendous physiological shift where it's like they can start to feel like they're actually getting energy back, right? Because when they're dealing with all these symptoms of chronic widespread pain, it's like constant dissipation of energy. They're struggling with fatigue. They're not getting the best sleep. They're having, mood disorders. We're looking at a multidimensional person, right? Dealing with a multifaceted, if you will, beast of a condition. So, we'll be looking at like, okay, the extent of this. It's going through the musculoskeletal system, through all the, the viscera, the nervous system, right? And after this overview, I want to make sure that the participants in this session get immersed, in the basic principles of aquatic therapy. I really want to empower the therapists who come to feel like they can begin to get a grasp on what is it that the aquatic therapists are leveraging out of the properties of water, right? I want to make sure that the therapists who come can understand, like, this is now how I can go and apply my tool set in that environment. So I'll give the participants a jump start in that process. I'll definitely go over how the tools of asana, pranayama, chanting, and even relaxation practices, right? How that can all be adapted to best serve their clients with CWP, chronic widespread pain. So that's an overview. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that. I find that totally fascinating as like a child of an island, totally surrounded by water. And the sea is amazing. I find it energizing and still calming at the same time, because you go in there and everything seems to kind of like dissipate. But then when you come out, it's like I have this newfound energy. So like I'm very interested. I'm so glad that these sessions are being recorded, because I know that we can't make it to everyone. So I am glad that you can go back and watch everything that me and Kelly will be working quite a bit, so we might not always get to take in everything. So I can't wait to go back and really engage with stuff. Every time we have these sessions, I get even more fascinated. I'm like, whoa, this conference is awesome. So thank you so much. And we are going to go to Gina. I think you were still muted, Gina.
I asked, are you going to do your workshop in a pool, in the hotel pool?
I would love to, but what's going to happen is we are going to be in a classroom setting on land. I have some creative movement ideas. I will bring that into the presentation. We'll use our imagination. We'll use the gift of Vikalpa, right? and I'll have videos, and then so this was an idea. So someone mentioned to me, like, well, what if you invite your participants to come join you at the pool later at the end of the day? And I thought, that's a lovely way to approach that. So that will be the invitation that's extended at the end of my land talk. We'll call it a land talk.
Gina, before you go, I'm going to have to run. I've got a yoga nidra class to teach, but it's been a real pleasure to be with all of you, and I look forward to seeing you all in Atlanta in a couple of months. So namaste. Take good care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I can piggyback on everybody's. We're all very connected here. I wonder if we're all teaching at the same time, or what I signed up for and what I can attend. I actually live in Crestone, Colorado. I can get to 3 hot springs, and I have fibromyalgia from the carbon monoxide exposure. So it's really been like, it's what I do for. It's so much better than land yoga for me. When I do land yoga, it kind of hurts. So my talk is connected to some of the other presenters who have already introduced their talk. Mine is called Eastern Movement for Queer and Marginalized Communities, Yoga Therapy and Qigong. And I decided to do this talk because I work, at the US border primarily, but throughout the country and in the Zaleka refugee camp. And a high percentage of our clients are fleeing for their lives because they're queer. And, I'm working with marginalized communities. I love, hearing about other marginalized communities like the elder population and how to adapt our classes for that population and for the dying population, the cancer population. And, that's probably not what I would have touched on. So I'm glad that other people are. Another marginalized group that we work with at the border are, I call them differently gifted. They're young adults that have left high school and, looking for their next job. And this is like a place where they hang out with their peers. And a lot of them are have become really incredible artists at this place and do art shows in town. And, so we'll be doing trauma-informed yoga therapy with them. And we've been going back for many visits, and they love it. And we love them. And, of course, everybody we work with at the border is displaced and without money and have experienced a lot of assault, sexual, physical. Some of these people are from Haiti. They end up in like Mexico. They don't even speak Spanish. So you can just imagine the kind of things they have to deal with. So, that's my background. And of course, as a woman, and I've had a very marginalized year myself, going through a divorce, and as a queer and marginalized person, I'm like, this has been the hardest year of my life. And I'm like, why am I going through this? And I said, well, I decided to teach that workshop at SYTAR. So it's like I get to really experience what it is to be marginalized, to need what it is to go after public assistance and not get it, and that kind of thing. So, I'll be sharing, research that shows, what are the peak marginalized communities, and women are the top ones, believe it or not, nationally and internationally. And also I'm going to share research on queer identity and the biology behind being queer and transgender. Again, I didn't know the outcome of the election either. And, this is becoming more and more important. So, I've been at SYTAR when we had like a DEIA talk, and then I'd go outside and I'd hear some yoga therapists complaining about it, like, oh, this, and it's just like, in this workshop, we are going to continue to practice, using language that's more welcoming for these groups. I am very involved in the queer women's community in Western Massachusetts, and people come right out and say to me how yoga is not queer friendly, and so I'm going to talk about in the workshop about the origins of the language masculine and feminine. And coming from a sacred sexuality training background, I very quickly needed to get on my game because I offered my programs to everybody. And I would say, and, LGBTQIA plus welcome, and they would come. And I quickly needed to learn how to teach this. And this was 10 years ago, or more. And I did write an article called Queering Tantra, which you can find on my website, just to see, what I was doing back then. And I'm still practicing the language myself. Like, I do this training called trauma-informed yoga therapy for marginalized communities. And I have all these young yoga therapists coming in, and yoga instructors, and they have been raised with more welcoming, inclusive language. And, there are times when I said, we taught teen girls, and the facilitator who works for Casa de Paz SLV said, I call them teens. So it's these kinds of things that we'll be talking about in the workshop. And, we don't need to label people by gender. And the workshop will be this is just how I roll, 50 to about 75% experiential. So I'll just, we're going to start with a kind of compassion, really embodying what it is to be marginalized. And, I'll be sharing primarily Qigong, maybe some yoga, but using Qigong as an example of a movement modality that uses welcoming language rather than masculine and feminine. So just, helping everybody else to, shift that language. So let's see, was there anything else? I don't think there was anything else I wanted to share about the presentation. I'm open to questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gina. This kind of coming off of like what Cheryl was saying as well. I think these conversations are so important because how do we create these welcoming spaces for marginalized communities? Like it's like, how do we do this so that they feel like this is a safe space? And I noted that you mentioned that you're still there and you're still learning. We're all learning. And that's like the beauty of it, because we're all in this space where we're trying to get better. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you lending your voice to helping us move in this space, because there's so much beauty in the practice and we want to make sure that everyone experiences it. But if they don't feel like it's a welcome space, they're not going to come. So thank you again so much for that. Wow, this conversation has been so wonderful. Time flies. Time really does fly when you're like having fun. I want to thank you so much for your time, and everyone who's out there. If you're here with us now, or you may be catching up on this a little bit later, thank you for spending these moments with us. Presenters, you are fabulous. I can't wait to see you in Atlanta in June. For everyone, if this conversation sparked something for you, there's so much more where that came from, as you can tell. So SYTAR is where there's learning, connection, and community all come together, and we would really love for you to be a part of it. If you haven't registered yet, I do invite you to head on over to sytar.org. That's SYTAR.org, and you can check out the full schedule. You can get to know all of our truly wonderful our truly wonderful presenters, and reserve your spot. And if you found this live really helpful, please feel free to share it with your community. Before we wrap up, I'm going to see if there were any questions in the chat. I know I'm not checking Instagram, but Kelly, did you see anything on Instagram?
No, we have some watchers on Instagram, but I haven't seen any questions come in. If anyone there has questions, I am watching the chat. You can pop something in.
And I guess if you can't think of anything right now, you can always reach out to us at IAYT. And what's the best email? You can find us. What do you think, Kelly? What's the best place to go? Just on the contact us page?
I think, contact us at the top right corner of the IAYT website if you're using a computer. That way we can assign your question to the best person to give an answer.
Okay, perfect. And don't forget, we're going to be back here on the 24th of April and May 1st with some more presenters. We love these conversations. So they're going to be sharing their topics and the perspective that we know that you will totally love. If you want to revisit last year's content, SYTAR 2024 is available on demand, and you can catch all the sessions, watch at your own pace at conferences.iayt.org. And if you want to stay connected with us throughout the year, you can subscribe to our e-newsletter at iayt.org. It is open to everyone, and it's a truly awesome way to stay in the loop. You don't have to be a member at all. But I want to thank you again for tuning in, whether it's here live or you're catching up on the replay. We are so glad that you are here and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.